Because I'm a genius, thought I'd eat a mustard and sandwich before going on. So if I'm yellow, that's probably why. Fucking idiot. Don't eat mustard before a stream. Fucking idiot. Anyway, hello. How are you all? I thought I'd better log on. This will count as like a bit of a hi, everyone. I'm not dead. Quick, like, catch up comedy thing, whatever. Okay. Not comedy thing, not very funny, but a comedy diary. I know I was going to do them daily, and then things got away from me, and I've actually just been in writing mode. What's interesting about it is that I've realized it's like, okay, let me use a music analogy because no one's ever done that before. But when you can have like a whole bunch of ideas, okay, and you can be good at a certain thing, but when you've got to like turn it into a certain form, like the decision to go, I've got funny ideas, I've got lots of ideas, I've got lots of random snippets, lots of writing. I realized that I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of like potential premise. I've got premises, you know, lots of written snippets, all that sort of stuff. Don't have any jokes. And to use a music analogy, it's like I can sit and improvise like jazz for days. I can do chord progressions. I know how to play a major and minor chord. I know how to do various things. I've got thousands of demo tapes. No songs, no finished, completed songs that are radio ready. And I think that that's been really interesting to use that metaphor. Like, it's not that I'm not a musician per se, it's that I don't have any finished songs yet. Okay, so it's more like, so it's been interesting because I have to now turn years and years and years and years and years and years and years of stuff, of improvising and all that sort of stuff into actual finished songs. And much like pop songs and much like radio, especially being radio friendly or having something, you know, those things have a certain format and a certain structure. And a pop song, you know, it's got to have It's got to have, bridge, chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. There's a structure. There's, you've got all these sorts of things. And then it's got to be 2.5 minutes long. It's got to be paced a certain way. Same that's what happens when you're doing comedy and writing jokes. So it's not the absence of material per se. It's a massive amount of turning stuff and getting the structure right, figuring out what kind of jokes you want to tell, putting them into an act. So like in the old days, children, there used to be this thing called an album where musicians not only just have songs, but an album would have a whole theme, and it would have a whole vibe, and like things sort of flow on together, and they tell a story, and a 5-minute act is no different to releasing an album, right? Which is that you want your jokes to go together, and you got to have an overall theme, and so there's a lot of work that goes into this kind of thing, which again I think I'm on target with, but again a lot of this stuff, and again also the balance is between that, which is, okay, I want to do this properly. I've finally decided that I'm going to write in this particular structure, this art form. I'm going to pursue this art form. Okay. I've done this other art form for a long time. How do I take this and put it into this? Okay. And you're kind of relearning a new craft. It's like I said, it's like going from being a, just someone who just plays and riffs and jams and garages and stuff to having a fully finished song, right? It's a lot more work than you'd think, but you kind of got to learn how to, even switching song genres, switching from sort of, blues to jazz, or jazz to pop, or rock to pop. They've all got different form, right? They've all different things. Then comedy's no different. Okay, so trying to figure out what the best way to do it is, but also making sure that you don't waste, knowing where you're at, which is that I'm not going to be doing the kind of comedy that I would like to do later on, a showcase or an open mic where it's an audience that aren't necessarily coming to see me and my style. That's a whole other challenge. Right, that's what I found really interesting in the last couple of weeks, because I have just been sitting and I've just been going to shows, observing, sort of, like, again, I'm a consumer of comedy. I go to every, up until money became quite tight, I would go to everything. Okay, obviously at the moment, like, no one can afford to do fuck all, so it's like, okay, I go to what I can. But I also. There is a very big difference between paying to see a specific comedian and a general kind of audience that aren't necessarily, and winning them over, right? So I didn't plan to go here, but this was one of the things that stood out for me some years ago when I saw Ben Folds, one of the many fucking 20 times I've seen Ben Folds live. But Clem Snide, Eve Barsley from Clem Snide, opened for Ben at this show, and it's so stuck with me as his opener, because he showed up, and this is, if you are like, if you go to things regularly, you'll understand how impressive something like this is, which is being an opener is actually really hard work. Being an opener in particular is really hard work, because you're playing to someone else's audience. Okay, now in theory, when you choose your opener, you would have you'd have an act that complements you. So it's like, before it's like the Netflix recommend. You would have someone go, well, if you've come to see me, chances are you'll like this guy. Okay, so there's going to be some synergy between the two. But something that I found really interesting about him was that I just went, you have balls, man. So I'll never forget this. So we were all there. We were sitting there waiting to see Ben come out, and obviously we're sitting there going, okay, when's he going? And Eve comes on stage, and it was just him and his guitar, and he just opened up with a cappella, and he did a cappella of Long Lost Twin. So if you know his song, then it was just a man and his voice with someone else's crowd, and it was just like, fuck me. Like, that was real. And he won them over, right? I actually just paid attention to that. Again, this is just nerd shit. This is performance stuff that I find interesting, that no one else finds interesting. But I remember that this was like 20 years ago. And I remember just how difficult that is, but how boss mode that is as well, to come out just a cappella, a song. Like, most people wouldn't have known the song. They weren't familiar with it. He could have opened with like the main song, like the song from Ed, like the Moment in the Sun, right? He could have opened with that, but he didn't. He just went out, balls to the wall, a cappella to someone else's crowd. And that, again, that just stuck with me. And I think that it's very similar. And again, this is just so extraordinarily uninteresting and niche to anyone other than people who are, because comics already know this, but people who are maybe interested in like the journey. And that's what I thought I would talk about. That's what this is to talk about these journey and, these, I hate the word journey. Trying to think of a better word, but my experiences with the odds well against me ever doing anything with this, but giving it a shot. But just sort of documenting my observations along the way as both a comedy fan of many years and also just someone who's got an interest in this stuff, and hoping that others might find it interesting. But I find it really fascinating, again, having to win over people that aren't already on board with you. Like, I find it hard enough to keep people who like me, let alone win people over with like with my charm. Like, I take a while to warm up even on a stream, right? And so I do find that interesting. So I have been sitting at these open mics and just sort of paying attention to the crowds, and they vary between shows. So every show, one of the places that I've been going to a fair amount is like a 10 for 10 kind of night. So it's about 50 to 70 people, which is not a small sample size, okay? For an open mic, that's probably the place where I'll do my first gig. It seems to be a good environment for it. But I have been going quite a bit and just observing the crowd. And it is a bit of a crapshoot because it is in a sort of tourist area. And I've found from week to week, like, sometimes you'll just get a group of sort of locals, right? You'll get sort of a mixed crowd, lots of different demographics, different ages, all that sort of stuff. But then every so often, like the week before last, it was the room was 60% UK tourists, because it was a backpackers. There's a backpackers lodge around the corner. And they were all English tourists. And it was just very interesting because obviously you've got repeating acts. And there's things that they work with one crowd, don't work with another crowd. And it's not necessarily even the jokes. The crowd, there's just something really fascinating about that, and challenging about that part. Now, I know everyone, again, I'm not saying anything that people don't know. It's not like I'm going, oh, look at this revelation. It depends on the audience, right? I just find it fascinating seeing one particular thing that I've observed is the attitude, the culture wars comics, like, again, the sort of edgier comics, right? They're not landing the way they think. It's really interesting because, like, I was sitting there and, like, if you're actually listening to the laughter, you would hear quite loud laughter. You'd think it went well. But if you're actually paying attention to the people in the audience and actually sitting there watching and observing, like, you'll notice that you can see like a trend in who is and isn't laughing, first of all. And it's actually not so much that these topics are funny or interesting. It's just that the people who find it funny are louder. So I'm noticing that there's obviously young men sort of you've got a particular type of comic at this level, right, that goes with edgy, and they go with shock comedy, and there's nothing particularly wrong with their jokes. But they're not, I mean, I've heard them 100 times, but at the same time, it's just funny because you just sit there and you go, none of the women in this room are laughing at this. There's like, it might, again, but if you're listening and you close your eyes. So one thing that I did was I closed my eyes and listened to the crowd, and it sounded like it was a big laugh. But I actually looked around and it was just loud minorities laughing, as in like bros. So like these things that you think are funny and edgy, and edgy doesn't seem to work. Like what's interesting, and again, that I think, and also like political humor doesn't seem to land. It's just really interesting to watch because, again, you sit in your echo chamber, the people who show up to my streams or like hang out with me on Twitter or whatever, those have a particular sensibility about them and they're more politically savvy. But I think that it is really fascinating to, when you're looking at building an act, to go and actually watch like what the audience, what resonates with the audience. Like what I thought that my material would be is probably changed a little bit in the sense that I noticed that like the kind of people are just fed up with, they're fed up with it all. They're fatigued by fucking political shit. And you can tell if you just have any sense, if you have any like reading the room at all, and you're just watching the body language, you're watching sort of who comes in and out, who stays and leaves like halfway through. Now, again, this is not an open mic, right? This is not like the US open mics where it's you're just doing it to like 10 other comedians who are just whatever. This is actually people who pay to come, that you know, it's a pub, they come to see it, and there are, you know, a fairly decent members of sample size of the members of the public. Like my first, if I do that venue, it will be to 50, 60, 70 people, okay? 40 to 50 of whom are just punters, right? So that's actually really interesting because I find it really, really, because the things that, and this is one of my big revelations. I know I'm waffling here, but one of my big revelations is that, first of all, the material that you use for 5 minutes is not going to be anything that I use 5-10 years from now. All right. Most of the stuff that I've written that I think is good, that I think is great, it is stuff that builds. It is stuff that has to be part of a bigger show. It is stuff that has to be more sort of, you know, people who are already in on my joke. They go to see the, you know what I mean? All that sort of stuff. They're already sort of pre-sold. They're primed, if it were, to, you know, appreciate the show, right? Versus the 5 minutes. The 5 minutes is very different. 5 minutes means that you just got to say, to an extent, it is somewhat not about you. It is about you showing up. It is about you getting practice. It's like, I'm trying to think of another. It's very interesting, and I'm still passing it. But I'm finding that I'm having to write very different jokes to what I thought I would be writing. Just because I don't feel that I could deliver them with the right tone or with the right, people aren't already in on what I'm about. Okay, so it's really, anyway, I keep saying it's really interesting, but that's just something that I have observed just from this scene. Now, this scene's pretty brutal as it is. You, like, even if I sign up, I'm not going to be able to be on stage probably for 3 to 4 weeks, like minimum. So it's, you know, you do get a lot of thinking time between that and actually doing it, and your time is few and far between. So you've got to have other ways of getting stage time, which I'm working on as well, which is, you know, sort of doing more speaking and that sort of stuff. But and humor writing is probably, my strength is really in writing, but that's okay. Working on that. But it has been fascinating just from me being very arrogant, right? Quite arrogant, thinking, oh yeah, I've just already got material. I can already just go up and do 5 minutes. I got hours of stuff. But then you actually go there and you watch like comic after comic after comic, like just not read the room for a start. So you go there and you start to see people repeating their act to different crowds, and you go, oh wow, well that landed, that didn't land. So one example that I've got, obviously this is not intended to bitch out or critique other comedians. I'm just observing from my point of view, because it's not easy. But one thing that they've done is that they'll go in, and I've seen a couple of these, which is landlord jokes or renter jokes or property market jokes. And what happened was that they were doing. It was funny. It made me laugh, right? I'm obviously not going to repeat the joke, but it was a joke about landlords and real estate agents. But 70% of the room were backpackers from the UK who were visiting. So they weren't aware of the context. So, jokes are as much about context as they are about anything else, about structure, form, or subject, right? It's about the context that you're in. And so it is a really fun thing to sit and watch, because that joke would have done well if it was a room full of students or a room full of renters. But instead, you've got a room full of people who can afford to travel in 2024, which is already few and far between. They were younger, so they're not cynical and broken like me. Like, I sit there and do fucking 7 hours of like ranting about like real estate agents and stuff. But at the same time, our real estate agents, especially in Perth, you have to have there's a whole bunch of homework that you've got to do to understand the jokes. And it's just, anyway, I know I'm rambling, but I just thought that was really fascinating. So if you are thinking about it, don't just go and do an open mic. Actually sit and watch the crowd for a while first. And I know that there's people that say that too. You should do that. And I'm glad that I've been doing that, because I was so wrong. I was so up myself and so arrogant, thinking that I'd just go and do my material and it was all about me. And it's like, fuck, if I had gone in like head first with the act that I had written, I would have bombed, like epically, okay? Because I wasn't reading the room and I wasn't paying attention to the fact that room changes from week to week. Also, honestly, like, Perth is a really interesting town in the fact that there's a disparity, there's a gap in understanding. So like, very few people are political, for a start. People's understanding of politics is generally quite superficial. And a lot of people who are something that I know, having grown up in a family like this, which is that if you're getting paid, there's nothing wrong. If things are good for you, there's nothing wrong with the world. And so I found it really interesting, where things where they're true, like renting sucks. And I've brushed up against this as well. And a lot of this involves the setup. Like, it is a technical thing of making sure that you do a good setup. But there's something just very strange happen. And again, this is just the political context that we operate in, where people who already own their house or have a mortgage, they feel like they've got it tough. But they don't have it as tough as renters, but everyone's sort of bickering over who's got it worse. And I'm finding that, and this is what I find really interesting about political comedy, especially when you're a sort of female political comic, right? Which I wouldn't say that I'm a political comic really, but I just happens to be an area that I know a lot about. But it's really interesting, because I keep saying interesting. I'm aware of that. I'm just thinking. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about my words and take the time. And one thing I also need to get better at is being okay with pausing, sitting in the thought and thinking through. So I don't need to fill the dead air. There can just be dead air. Okay, it's my stream. I can do what the fuck I want. Fucking Hassan Piker just walks off and goes to the toilet. It's like, fucking hell, I can just relax. No, but one thing I've noticed, and again, this speaks to the Australian political culture, which is that people are trying to mimic, replicate. They're trying to use American premises, Americans, there is a distinct thing that I'm finding really interesting about American comedy not really landing here. So much like this sort of cooker shit, right? With the COVID cooker bullshit, okay, where people are getting into conspiracy theories and stuff. You know, that's sort of an import from America, and there's only a handful of people who are like online, have gone down this rabbit hole and are just they've gone, their brain's gone like that. I think there is there's a version of that, and the same thing with the sort of, this sort of hyper woke, urban, bougie fucking bullshit. Okay, that's another sort of super online pocket. But the other thing that I'm noticing is that the American Rogan bro, sort of very literal, very superficial style of comedy, it's not doesn't translate as well, and it doesn't extrapolate sort of broadly in the way that I thought it would. And that's what I find fascinating, because you're just seeing that I'm seeing a lot of people where they, again, a lot of it is men, the male, who are, it's a type, right? Your Isaac Butterfields, those types of people, right? Where at some point they've kind of forgotten that they needed to have a punchline, first of all, but also that there are different styles of comedy, but there are real subtle differences between Australian audiences and overseas. And it's only become obvious to me how different they are by just sitting and watching sort of everyday open mic. It's not an open mic, but, let's just, whatever. It's probably more like a showcase, but whatever. But these sort of 10 for 10 sort of comedy shows where there's okay, so how they work is that it's a 10 for 10. So there's usually like one or two newbies, or two or three newbies. You just sign up, but then there's also people who are have been doing it for a while, and they kind of build a 10-act showcase, and they sell it to the public as 10 for 10, right? 10 for $10. You go there, you see 10 comics line up with their 5 minutes or whatever, and then, that's sort of how it's structured. Okay. Sorry, just to confuse. So if I say open mic, that's because that's basically the main way that open mics run here. So it's a bit of best of both worlds. It's a good way to do it, but it can be a bit intimidating because anyway. So you don't get those sort of practice things like you do in America, where they've got those things where you're doing it with 5 or 3 or whatever people. You actually just get thrown in the deep end here. So that has its benefits and its downsides. But anyway, but that's actually something that I find really fascinating. Now, again, I'm not saying anything that isn't already known, or that people, that isn't like, oh yeah, suck eggs, okay, whatever. But it's just something for me personally, when you start paying attention to the things that you think are popular in terms of comedy are not as popular as you think. And I think that applies online as well, where the things that are being shared and the things that are making people argue and the things that are getting a reaction are not necessarily the things that people find funny universally. And I just find that really interesting, because there is a degree of, you've got to be willing to look beneath the surface with a lot of this stuff, much like with the internet, where I can see behind the data because I know the behavior and I can sort of understand what people are thinking by reverse engineering it. It's not necessarily as it appears. Like anybody who does content online, and especially political content, doesn't take their interactions on face value, because people, are aware of the fact that they're now interacting and sharing thoughts publicly. So they're going to be doing stuff behind the scenes, right? And even then, people are going to be paranoid about DMs. They're going to be paranoid about things being screenshotted. So most of the conversations that people have, or the things that they laugh at or whatever, are happening offline or with, via chat or whatever. And even via chat, people, like I now, I didn't before, but with WhatsApp and stuff like that, unless it's like Paul or whatever, I'm basically destroying messages. I basically have it all set so that it like self-destructs, because I think that that's just that's just the way the internet is now, is that we're aware that it's permanent. And I think that that's the same thing where um, you can't walk, you can't, I think it's very, again, I'm not, there is a balance here between overthinking it and there's a balance between taking it seriously and not being arrogant enough to just sort of go on half-assed, and letting yourself overthink it to the point because it becomes like an avoidance strategy, because I'm trying to avoid getting on stage. Walking that line is tough. Like for me, actually, like I've written first draft of a tentative act. It needs punching. It's not there yet. But again, it's a structural thing. It is not necessarily it's not a material thing. Like I said, I've got plenty of material, but it is actually now making it so that it is like a good 5 minutes for an audience. Like it's harder than it looks. Right? I've spent more time agonizing over this 5 fucking minutes than you ever could, than I've ever even thought about for anything long form that I've written ever. Like I usually just shit something out for like in an hour first draft, don't even look at it. And it's like this 5 minutes has been agonizing. So I've got to be careful to not sort of, not overthink it to the point where I never actually get anything done. Like there's a balance there. Okay. But at the same time, taking it seriously and observing and studying it. And like if it was very funny and weird to see a good act, good delivery, great joke, great jokes, great set, just not land because it just happened to have 60% tourists there who didn't know whether what she was saying was true or funny because they didn't know. And it has to be oriented in some sort of universal truth. And that's what I'm finding really interesting and challenging. So that's why I'm just going to be, that's again why they just say play to stereotypes in the beginning, because it's, and life experience and universal stuff. Like I got heaps of that kind of thing. I'm just trying to decide. I think, going with my being weird is a nerdy and weird as a kid, and being bullied by my family is probably a good part, because most people sort of feel that way. Without going fully, I'm not going to go into political, not going to go into sex jokes. I find again, it's really hard to do that. It's really, you're going to miss, and the women, like here you go, I've noticed this, dick jokes. You'll see men laugh loudly, very loudly, to the point where it is actually deceptive you think more people are laughing than are laughing, okay? Because the bros who love dick jokes, they laugh twice as loud as anyone else, okay? It's just something I've observed. Okay? They laugh twice as hard as people who don't, but you'll see the women are just like, oh, it's not funny. I don't like. Same thing, like dating apps, online dating. The men will be like, "Woo, Tinder, yeah, woo," whereas women will shut down and they're not. Like, they're embarrassed about it, right? And it's like, okay, that's interesting. So you got to kind of learn how to. But one thing I am learning, and again, this is just something I've always known, which is that you got to know who your audience is. Like straight up, like I know that there's going to be people in the audience that aren't going to vibe with me. There's like, honestly, the bros that laugh at dick jokes and pound the table thinking that a dick joke is the funniest joke ever, or an edgy pedophile joke is the funniest thing ever, probably not my target audience. Okay, it's probably a pretty, like, those are fairly distinct circles in the Venn diagram. Okay, between the bros who say that Hannah Gadsby's not funny. They're not my crew. Okay. But you're going to have jokes that sort of have a somewhat of an appeal to everyone. And that's what I find interesting. Anyway, that was just me rambling for what I've observed. But anyway, so I've got no songs. So I've got to make everything I've got to fucking make it all fit. And that's what I've been doing. That's why I haven't really streamed or anything, because I've just been writing. I've just been like insanely obsessed, but also what I've been doing is absorbing all of the technical stuff. So all of the courses, all of the training. I've read every book. I'm going through all the exercises. So like every fucking course that there is, just to, like that's just how I am. That's how I learn. I need to know all of the information, and then I'll apply that. I like to know the rules so that I can break them as quickly as possible. But I don't want to sit there and pretend that I know what I'm talking about when I know I haven't. Like, again, I'm an observer of comedy and I write funny and I'm all those things. I'm wired that way. But at the same time, I'm not going to pretend that I've had any technical training in the craft, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. But also the fucking major task of trying to like pull all my millions of words into actual structured jokes. It's harder than you'd think. I think you should try to write a joke one day, an actual proper technical great joke. It's fucking hard. Let alone how many do I need? I think I need about 12. Right, that all work together. Okay. So that's sort of where I'm at, but I'm getting there. I did set the deadline to do this for my birthday, before my birthday, which is what's the date today? Yeah, so my birthday's on the 16th. I was planning to do it before then, but I need a little more time. I do have uni going back in May as well, so I'm hoping to do it between now and then, but I want to do it right, and I want to start off on the right foot. And I don't want to, again, I know that there's things that you can only learn doing it on stage, but I don't want to take it lightly either, because you don't get as many opportunities here. Like, for like any Americans who might show an interest in this, it's a very different kind of market here, which is that in America, if you go, I want to be a comic, you can just go and hit up the mics and you'll get one, you'll get one every, a lot more frequently. Whereas here, you got weeks, and you got gatekeepers and all that sort of stuff. There's only a handful of events. So a lot of my practice is going to have to be in doing corporate speaking, practicing in my lounge room, believe it or not, practicing in front of friends. Like you can't train here as much as you would like. Okay, so if I'm going to get good, and I want to get good fast, because there's no point doing it otherwise, I have to find other ways to get that stage time in. So I'm looking at that, looking at whether having that corporate MC thing, maybe, that other, just, yeah. Anyway, I'm figuring that part out. So I've got to make this pay for itself somehow as well. So I've got a lot of stuff to figure out. And, like my son keeps saying, do TikTok. And I'm like, but you can't do TikTok because it burns you. It's like, Anyway, I want to do anything but online. I'm so sick of it. It's like she says on a live stream. Anyway, that was just, this is sort of a little quick catch-up update. Comedy diary, whatever the fuck. I noticed how I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. And I don't follow through. I will. I'll get my shit together next week. Right. So blank slates is, sorry. So did that come up? Yes, it did. Amiga, hi. Writing and then presenting it to a room of blank slates is a tough leap of faith that is never the same. That's the thing, right? It's the blank slate thing is really interesting. It is a world of difference from writing jokes where you've got in jokes, or you've got, like I said, you've primed people and people know what you're about. They trust you, right? But establishing that trust, like straight up, is really, really tricky. It's very hard. Like it's funny because I've turned around and said, oh, well, I don't want to do I'm a woman jokes. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to, because if anything, I want to subvert those stereotypes. I don't want to do stereotypes, but then you realize that those stereotypes and strawmen and those cliches, and again, I think this is the battle that I've got, is that my mind and my comedy and the things that I've written, I said this like a couple of weeks ago when I said, which is that most of my material is stuff for 5 years from now when people are already paying to see me. The stuff that I do now for stage time is lacking because I don't have universal appeal to begin with. And one of the things that, there's these rules in comedy, which is that you shouldn't use cliches, don't lean on, like, don't be hack. And it's like, well, maybe it's like, it is a bit hard because you're in a place where you've got to win over the majority of the room. And the only way that you can really win the majority of the room is by using stereotypes and cliches and generalizations and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm trying to, that's my inner conflict, which is that I'm trying to do niche material within my niche that I'm quite confident to do. Like the stuff that I do is quite funny, but you can't sit there and make fun of tech bros to a room full of real estate agents. They don't fucking know or care, and it's like, you get what I'm saying? So you need to just zoom out a bit. And forgive yourself and remember why you're doing these events. I'm not doing them because I'm trying to get discovered. I don't need to be discovered. I already have the networks, and that's one thing that I've got, which is good. I don't need anyone in this town per se, but I do need to be able to get stage time. I need to be bookable. I need to be someone who can show up and just deliver and win over an audience no matter who they are. And that is its own challenge, right? And it's like the music analogy would be, well, you're a brilliant death metal, you're brilliant at death metal, and you can fill an arena with death metal fans. But if you're invited to a thing where if the people that are booking concerts are smooth jazz elevator music fans, you need something that appeals to sort of more mainstream. It's like having the radio track, okay? If you're a musician, you got to have your radio track on an album to even have a chance of like getting on the radio, right? You got to have, you can't just be a pure concept album artist because you're not going to sell. If you can't, there's a certain form and format that you need to live by, or what are the words? It's Friday afternoon, I'm tired. But you've got to follow a certain format in order to get on the radio, in order to achieve sort of a more mainstream businessy. If you want the money and the fame, you got to do the thing. You got to do the certain format. Yes, once you can be a great world famous death metal band, but that grind is going to be a lot harder, and it's not necessarily going to be on the radio. Right? They're different kinds of things. And so I feel like I'm kind of like a death metal artist or a jazz music, probably more like a jazz musician, right? An improvised jazz person who's trying to create a radio hit or a series of radio hits so that I can obviously, that's yeah. And you've got to appeal to the mainstream. And so there's all of those things. And it's not just about, oh, well, write the song, do the song. It's also, when you're an artist and when you're a creative, there's all that internal shit about being a hack, selling out. It is very funny to see that sort of all descend upon these open mics in a way that I hadn't expected, which is that you've obviously got people who are good comedians but have no fucking idea how to read an audience and read a room. Then you've got your bros who think that, like, it's like, guys, I think there's 5 comics in the whole world that can get away with like the really edgy dark stuff. And it's like, I came home and I was like, don't do edgy like at all. Just don't do it at this stage. Because it actually is quite cringe. And it's like, are you Doug Stanhope? You're not Doug Stanhope? Then don't do it. Like it's like it's only a handful of people that can get away with that really sort of pushing dark humor, and it ain't the people that are doing a 10 for 10. It ain't, and it's just been really interesting because obviously, the people that I'm a fan of, do that kind of comedy, but it is very, very, very difficult. And it's just funny to see when I'm watching the audiences and stuff, right? So Chet said hi. So Amiga said, I appreciate the give the tourist the quick, safe laughs while delivering the true humor. You're intending to hit my opinion. For me, it was having to do drum solo each performance. I just never liked drum solos. I could play technical stuff and people like stick twirling. Yeah. 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 So, yeah, but that's right. So, I think it's one thing I find interesting for anyone who is curious about like this journey, because I thought that I'd document it because I find it interesting. I personally want to track my journey. And if someone else wants, I hate that fucking word journey, my adventures, okay, my thoughts on this thing, because you forget along the way, you forget these things. And there might be some wisdom in it, and others might feel like they want to do what I'm doing. Okay, so it's here for that. But the takeaway here is that you've got to know what your goals are with this stuff. So I don't have the luxury. I think that's the difference. I think when you're in your 20s, you're a little more fast and loose with this stuff, right? You can just go on stage. There's no stakes. But for me, it's like, fuck, I'm not, first of all, not a night owl. So I don't want to go out at like 8, 9, and 10 at night. It's like, oh my God, it costs me money to go. Okay. It costs me, cost me about $30 every time I go to this thing, because you got to have a drink and you got to pay for parking, and then you got to buy the tickets, and sometimes it's like $50-$60 every time I go to a thing. So it costs me money, costs me time, costs me energy. Okay, so I've got to have a reason for doing it. And yes, love is a big part of it, and wanting to do it is a part of it, but it is also something that I need to make viable. Okay, I'm always having to make things viable because I'm not fucking already rich, and I don't, I've got bills to pay too, and I do have a career to fall back on, thankfully, and I do have other things, but at the same time, I need to make this as viable as I can as quickly as possible, right? So I have different challenges than, say, a 20-year-old who's just fucking around. They live with their parents. They go, I'm going to get on stage, do comedy, see what fucking happens. I said this in my first comedy video, where I basically, where I was saying, like, I'm 45 years old, and, there's a good chance I have a shortened lifespan. And if I fail at this, then there's a good chance that this is my last opportunity to start over. I don't get another shot. When you're in your 20s, you can go, fuck it. Oh, well, I'll go retrain. I'm already doing that. I can't. There comes a point where your life gets in the way, and you've got to be realistic. And so, I do need to take it more seriously. I need to think about it, make more calculations, but also thinking and remembering what my goals are with these things. Like, I'm not there to win adoring fans, okay? I'm there to get stage time. I'm there to practice winning audiences over that would not so for that would be winning over, like I said, the bus of tourists, or if it's in Fremantle, so the sailors show up a lot here. So we've got a naval base right just nearby. So one of the things that often will happen is that the American sailors will show up. Okay, the Navy will show up. So you got to have some canned material that will appeal to various groups. Okay, so what I've done is I've started to break it down by occupation, and be ready for whatever. Or I have one or two jokes that kind of, not that I'm doing crowd work, because I'm not a big fan of crowd work, but at the same time, having those pre-canned jokes ready so you can adapt. Like, again, some of this comes with practice. Like, I'm just trying to do as much up front as I can. And a lot of it is because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I want my first one to go well, and it probably won't. Like, knowing that it's really, really hard knowing that you're going to suck ahead of time, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like every one of my Tinder dates. Do you know how hard it is knowing you're going to suck? Anyway, stupid joke. But it's just that's a head game. That's a head game. That's been a surprising thing. It's not just about, because I think, again, there's a myth that this is just about extroversion and attention and that sort of thing. It's not as simple and straightforward as that. Some people, yes, but for others, not so much. Like, for me, I'm doing it as a personal challenge because I don't like the stage. I don't seek the stage. I'm doing it because I like the craft, and because I kind of think, well, maybe I could do that. Like, I it's a challenge for me, and Uh, I think I can make it work, and others see something in me that I'm still not convinced, but I'm doing it anyway because I've been told that I should do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just see. Maybe I don't know myself as well as I think. So I'm just, seeing how I go with it. But I do need to take anything I do need to take seriously because I'm a fucking adult. So, but anyway, so that's that. But how long have I been streaming for? 50 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to keep it under the hour. This was basically just because I haven't streamed all week, but I'm going to get my shit together next week. I promise. I know I say that every week, but I am going to get my shit together next week. But it's, yeah, I've got a few things actually I want to talk about. So I want to explain, I want to talk about AI a bit more and how that's shitting the bed. I want to talk about some of the other bits and pieces, like the tech stuff and various other things. This is a quick stream / comedy diary all in one, because I haven't done it all week and I really need to keep the muscles going. But I will be back next week with slightly more stuff. So but yeah, a lot of it has been, it's very annoying. It's actually incredibly frustrating knowing that you've got some good I've got really good material, I've got a good perspective, I've got life experience, all those things. But it's an interesting head game. So Omega said military people are a definite X factor audience wise. This is interesting ramble. Thank you. Yes, thank you. That's good to hear because I feel like I'm rambling. But it's just yeah, and it's just, again, I think it's just something about, and again, I know every place has its quirks, but Perth in particular has a weird intersection because the people who would, it's a funny old thing. Like every crowd is different, like very vastly different. You can't necessarily predict it. And it is funny because I was watching the MC do the same jokes over and over again because they do, right? They make it, even the crowd work is not terribly spontaneous, right? They're just good at, it's as much an act of diversion, and you're a bit of a magician. You just got to make your segues make it look like it's off the cuff, but it's not really. Watch them enough and you realize that a lot of it is like pre-canned stuff. But that requires a lot more preparation, right? Which is that making sure that I've got a joke for, I've got to kind of guess. I've got to have some sailor jokes, have some general bogan jokes, have some occupational, just one or two like little just corporate kind of like you're dead inside kind of jokes, right? A lot of that stuff is I've got to have something for everything just so that so that I can connect with the audience. Like building that relationship and trust with the audience is paramount. It is really like, and that I think that's actually, I know I'm sort of rambling again a bit more, but like it's such an interesting thing. It comes back to that Clem Snide thing that I was talking about, where he just won our trust. It's got nothing to do with like whether jokes land or not has very little to do with the actual material, the joke. Like I could close my eyes and listen to the words of a joke and it be technically great. Like there's nothing that I could actually change, or it would be edgy or whatever. But you got to take that audience along with you, or you won't win them. Like, again, that's just paying attention. I love watching, this is, again, where before money got shit, okay? And when I used to get more comps and stuff, I don't get comps anymore. But when I used to have money to go and buy tickets, like, I would go, I'm the kind of audience, I'm the fan that, like, that fucking spooks people, because I will go to multiple nights. So I will watch multiple nights of the same comic to see like how they go, right? And that's something that I do, and I know that it pisses them off and it's unnerving and creepy, but I like seeing that part. And so, but it is really interesting to sit and watch the different crowds with the exact same joke, and it will it's fascinating to see. I love that part. It's really, that's the puzzle for me that I find interesting, is how can you make that as predictable as possible? It's really, it's again, like it's an impossible situation, and I don't know why anybody would do it, myself included. But it's a lot of it is about winning their trust, winning people's trust. And that was the thing. I can't remember the words. I came home and I said it to Paul, and it was quite profound, and I was like, I should write that down, and I didn't, because I'm a fucking idiot, of course. But it was along the lines of like edgy jokes. And this is why edgy jokes pay off. Like, this is why the payoff has to be there, and why I think edgy jokes in this situation don't work as well. Again, most people who have done comedy or are in comedy go, no shit, Sherlock. I'm saying this is my observation, is that the reason why I think edgy jokes don't land is because you don't have time to win the audience's trust. In that, like, one thing that I love is, like, I'm more of a Stuart Dylan Moran, sort of more UK, where they've got sort of a longer setup and and the punchline, it's just a different style of comedy, right? Americans are sort of more, let's say shallow, straightforward in terms of their comedy, right? Generally, not all, but there are obviously exceptions. But I'm saying, like, your mainstream American comedians are all like set up, punch, set up, punch, set up, punch, like nothing really beyond that, right? But one thing, like with Stuart Lee, right? I wasn't a Stuart Lee fan for many years. Like, I remember, this is what I think my comedy palette has gotten more sophisticated as I've gotten older as well, because I remember everyone was like, Stuart Lee is the best. And I watched Carpet Remnant World when it first came out. And I was like, I don't understand this. He's not telling jokes. But then I actually understood, and as obviously as I progress and studied the art and a bit more of a writer and understand the sort of technical aspects of writing better, and also especially around comedy, understanding that, like with Stuart Lee, what he does is the whole thing about his act is that you trust that he's going to deliver and that he knows what he's doing. And so you go to a Stuart Lee show and he'll just talk, he'll just go, and you'll go, I know what I trust is that even if I'm upset by something you've said or what you've said, or, if I don't like what you're saying, I trust you because I know that you will get there in the end. Okay. Again, same thing. People who watch my streams, we've got that kind of relationship as well, to an extent, where, obviously it's a bit, the chatter's not there at the moment, but like, I get the feedback. Most people just watch because they like just watching me riff, and they just have me on in the background. But some of the feedback that I do get is that, they like just watching me because they know that I'll sort of get there in the end. They're just sort of rooting for me along the way, and that's sort of part of my style. But with a comedian and in a showcase like that, where they don't know who you are, you can't go in with a presumption of trust that you would have with a more established comic, with someone where the audience knows them already and they know what they're about. And that's what I find really fascinating. Again, this is just I'm just uncensored thoughts, just rambling to whoever about something that I've observed. And I don't know whether new comedians might value this observation. They probably would. But it is something that I've observed, which is that there's an arrogance that comedians have in these showcases where they're part of a big lineup, and there's just a presumption of trust, but the audience doesn't know who you are. They don't know. They go, well, are you being a dickhead who's just saying fucking trans jokes? Are you just a fucking dickhead who thinks that punching down is funny? Or Are you someone who's worth the investment? And I think that that's the thing, is that you've kind of got to do a little handshake at the beginning and go, you know what? I got this. My body language. I think that's the thing that you learn with practice. That's the thing that you can get on stage, is that learning. I don't think it's about being on stage. Honestly, I think it is about having situational awareness. I think it is, and again, 2 weeks from now, after I've done my set, I will come back with a whole different set, because but again, this is just years and years and years of being a comedy fan, seeing shows, for all intents and purposes, other than stage time, being wired like a comedian, right? But this is just something that I've observed, is that stage time is not about the performance. While yes, technically it is about performance, there are things that you can do to optimize laughs and all that sort of stuff. But I think that the biggest part of it is situational awareness. So first of all, if you've got strong situational awareness, I think you'll be okay. So you look and see that the women are like this while you're telling your dick jokes, or that you are sort of losing pockets. I mean, you're not going to win everyone, but, if you can see that and spot that, if you can tell the difference and learning the difference between an agreement laugh and an actual spontaneous laugh, or a bro laugh. I've noticed that the bro laughs, whilst loud, are not generally consensus of the crowd, that's been that's a fascinating thing, because I go, well, okay, the bros aren't my audience, but the type of, like, the actual sound of, it's amazing. Like, again, you go to enough shows and you notice the difference. And you watch and you look at the women in the room and you go, okay, none of them are laughing at this. But it sounds like I said, it sounds like a loud laugh. It sounds like it went well, but really you lost 55% of the room, and you don't even realize it, because the dickheads are laughing. And also, one thing that I did notice was that if the MC and the other comics are those guys, they're laughing loudly, and you think that because the comics are laughing that the crowd is laughing. And again, that's whole back of the room stuff, and that's okay. But at the same time, it is really fucking, I just love watching this little social experiment unfold every time I go. And I learn something new every time. And especially, like, I didn't realize that I'm probably a cleaner comedian than I thought, for a start. And I'm also, it was funny because having seen so many women not laughing at certain jokes, and I've had to sort of revisit, because I've always had a slight allergy to the female comic, but at the same time, I've also noticed that there's a very big difference between what women laugh at and what men laugh at, and I've got to kind of decide there. So it's there's a few things in conflict there. I'm sure that, again, I think if you can universalize it as much as possible and make it as accessible as possible, even if it's not going to be what my career is. By the time I'm worried about 20-30 minute specials and stuff, I will have a base of support where people are more in line with my reasoning, and I can take more risks. But at the moment, it's just about, I think I see it as an opportunity to learn how to read the room, to really pay attention. Again, this is just because of my background. I think is user experience work and canvassing and all of those things is just it's just automatic. So for me, I go, oh yeah, look to the crowd. Okay, so they're not laughing. They are a bit, but you can tell they're uncomfortable. Those guys are obnoxious. Okay, who am I looking to win here? And I find it's anyway, I've talked too much about this, but I've said it the same thing 3,000 times. You get the point. But I'm not going to go there and start doing jokes about tech and AI and so again, there's this whole super online thing too, where it's like fewer people are on Twitter than you realize, folks. Okay, Twitter jokes aren't not you. I just gonna go with universal stuff. I think a lot of it is probably more around being a weird kid, and that's fairly universal because most people think they're a weird kid in their own way. So I'm just going to go with that. And also around, I mean, my name is low hanging fruit. So talking about roll call and, low hanging fruit and again, it doesn't have to be like the most sophisticated, clever, amazing jokes. It just needs to be. I thought that was that's what's really interesting, is that I've actually realized that I just have to write a pop song. It has to have a good hook, and it's better to have 5 consistent, good, mediocre hits than one hit that gets crowded out in an album of bullshit. You get what I'm saying? Like, or just like it's too like experimental for the crowd. It's better to have consistent. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying it's better to have sort of, I'm not saying mediocre, but I'm saying good, solid pop songs are harder in many ways. Consistent, all of those things are way, way more difficult than you'd think. And simple is often harder to get, is harder than complicated. I'm overcomplicating a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the complex jokes that are a bit more sort of meta humor or ironic or political or anything like that, I can do those later. I can sit on them and do them later and just get my stage time in, be friendly, be whatever, do what I need to do right now to build that audience and build that relationship. Now, the problem is when a lot of comedians get that, a lot of comedians have... Bob Saget is probably the best example of that, where they, and a lot of UK people do that too, where if you get to a point where you are palatable on, and you're doing TV or you're getting a sort of pop crowd, and then you just suddenly show up and you show up and you start being yourself and doing the act that you want. You got to be careful with that stuff too, and straddling that, where people want you hit pop song that was the 2-minute radio thing, and then you go in and do an 11.5 minutes of improvised jazz, and they're like, fuck it, I didn't pay, this isn't what I wanted. So you got to be careful that and navigate that, but that's a later problem. But these are just things that I'm way overthinking because I'm a procrastinator, but I will do it. I'm getting there. I was going to do it this week, but I'm not ready. I realized there was more for me to learn. I want to do the person that actually, I've done all of the courses now. And I'm working through them. I've read all the books and stuff. I'm finding Judy Carter's to be probably the best so far in terms of the exercises and the way she approaches it for beginners. I do like Greek. They've all got something to offer, like all of those comedy books and stuff. Again, it's not gospel, but they are tremendously useful in terms of learning how to structure a joke, going back to sort of basics, checking, having sort of certain checklists and various other things and exercises. I'm finding it tremendously beneficial, much like having a personal trainer. If you're an athlete, you need to do that stuff. You can't just go, oh, well, I know what's funny. Ha ha. It's like, no. It was funny actually, because my son is also aspiring. He has a YouTube channel, but he's also, I think he'll end up doing comedy as well, because he's just like, he's so fucking funny. Without effortlessly funny, that the kind of effortless wit that just once in a lifetime, he's got that, right? But he comes to me and I'm just helping him to sort of learn the structure about and he comes to me, he's like, oh, I've got this edgy joke. And I keep reminding him, I go, well, the edgier it is, the bigger the payoff has to be, because the audience needs to trust that you've got their back and that you're not there to just offend them and shock them. They need to release as well. You don't just build it and offend them. You need to do it for and release. Now, again, that's a school of thought. That's open to debate too. At the end of the day, if you've got an audience who buys tickets and you make them laugh, even if it's the worst laughs, even if it's like I'm not judging that, right? It's hard to do. It's just not my cup of tea, and that's okay. If you've got an audience, then you've got an audience. It's okay. But at the same time, if you're looking at the craft of like how these things work, which is that there needs to be a payoff at the end. So the more that you're building that tension, the bigger the payoff has to be, right? It has to be an equal risk. So if you're opening up with like pedophile jokes that are just there was There was this one guy at at one of these events a couple of weeks ago, and he just was laughing at the word gay. Every time someone said the word gay, he was just laughing because he said the word. And I was like, that was very strange because it wasn't as part of the joke. It was just there was, it was just, people laugh at weird things. And if you're just going to laugh at people who, if that's your audience, then that's fine. And you find your crew who are on board with you, and that's great. But it is just, it is funny. But I'm of the view that if you don't just go out of your way to upset people. You don't just go out of your way to, the difference between being a bully and being a comedian is that the comedian, you bully people a little bit, but you do it to kind of provoke some sort of, shift in thinking, or, they still trust you to fix it at the end. There's still some resolution, right? They trust that you're going to make it better, you're going to fix it, and that if they go along with you on this thing, that you've got their back, or that it's okay to laugh, or that there's, I don't know. I know there's better words around this. I'm still thinking about it, but it's just, yeah. Anyway, so, anyway, I've gone too long. It's been an hour and 10. I wanted to pop in and just say hello. I'm going to go back to writing. I'm not dead. Also, I found out that my pancreas are actually not, seem to be somewhat healthy-ish at the moment. Like, I've got some issues, but so I may actually have just been taking a long time to recover from my acute episode. And again, it can just it can get better and worse and relapse and remit. But at the same time, at the moment, I seem to have a somewhat clean bill of health. So that's a good thing, because I've been worried about that. Yeah, so there's been a lot going on. But yeah, so anyway, that's me. I'll be back next week. I will be doing a bit more stuff. This is just me cramming a week's worth of shit into an hour just to say hi. But I will do a proper text stream, and I'll do a spilling stream on Monday, and comedy diary twice a week. I've just been I've just not been in the right headspace. Also, our lease was running out, and with the market at the moment, there's always that risk that you're going to be we're not renewing the lease, get out, and you've got 30 days, and we've got a 0.1% vacancy right here. You can't get a house. And so there's just so much anxiety and stress. I was having panic attacks and, just all of this stuff trying to learn. And I'm just, sometimes this is a lot harder than it looks. And, but yeah, I'll be back next week. Hope you're well. And yeah, hopefully we'll be laughing together. I'll be on a stage soon. I'm not sharing it online, by the way. You're going to have to, but if you become a patron, I've already said that basically the suite will be that you'll get access to some of those things that I would not necessarily make public. And also, should I end up on tour with as an opener, which is the goal, the immediate goal that I've set is to end up as an opener. With the rest as a bonus, is to head up on tour. If I end up there, then I'll obviously get you comped as much as I can to whatever I go to myself. So if I'm in your town or whatever. So that's where I'm going to, that's the goal that I've got and I've set. And the rest is gravy. But so we'll go from there. It'd be good if I could just be a sort of, my dream would be to be working a circuit as an opener or feature, and then come home with no one knowing who I am. So I can live a quiet life, and then, I'd like to I've always wanted to live a nice little double life like that. It's well, I could do that in a way where I'm selling jokes and writing and stuff. And so there's other ways to do that, but I do want to give the stage thing a good shot and see if it's for me. I think that my particular brand of humor and delivery has something. And it's just something that, as someone with stage fright, I'd like to conquer. So let's just see how we go. All right. But anyway, I'm going to go. Have a great weekend. Become a patron if you can. If you can't, I understand. Everything sucks right now. And I will be back next week. A lot more than I have been in the last few weeks. I know I said that the week before, but I'll get there in the end. You just got to believe in me. I don't have a team or anything. I just do it around other things. So, but anyway, I will get my website finished because I got to rejig it now for more around sort of writing and the ability to put my jokes on there and, you know, market myself and that sort of stuff. And we'll go from there. So anyway, I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Thank you for Omega. Good to know you. Just started following me, so it's good to know you, and you showed up straight away. So you've done better than you've done better than most of the fucking people who have been following me for years. You've done better than most people. None of those cunts give a shit. Anyway, I love it when someone referred to Canadians as snowbogans, and I was like, "Is the best." And Chet, hello. Boo, Austin, hello. Okay, I don't know what that means. Have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, and also the Fallout series, see it. If you're a Fallout game fan, watch it. If you want to play, if you're on Xbox and you play Fallout 76, friend me and I'll give you like plans and shit. Okay? Hopefully it might get you playing the game. So anyway, I'll talk about that next week. All right. I love you. Take care. Bye. Do 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 Make it just having some fun.